Today is a truly Hasidic Inyan, Hasidic topic. So I think I said over this story like a month ago elsewhere. I apologize to anybody who heard it already. It needs to be repeated for today's start. So I'm just going to say this over. The Ktsai's son, Reb David Padharetz, after the death of his father, was working very hard to publish the Avnei Miluim. If you look in the short Hakdama that he writes to the Sefer Avnei Miluim, he writes that at a certain point he believed that this Sefer was destined to never be published. Like the Sefer Avnei Miluim was destined to the dust heaps of history. And he had no money and no connections. He was working very hard. And in those days there was something called permanentin, where basically crowdfunding for a Sefer. Actually today it's become popular again. Now it's easy to do that again. So they would crowdfund. Basically you'd send out like order forms to people.
Raise it?
Yeah, like for Svarim, like the Genis Elam was just republished like that. The Teres Chaim is being republished like that. Like it's today it's doable again, but they would send out an order form, and a person would submit his payment in advance, and you would be guaranteed that when the Sefer is published, you'd get a copy of it. Like that, he'd be able to fundraise to publish the Sefer. He started doing it, but he was only getting so far. What do you say? Kickstarter, exactly. He started, it wasn't going as well as he wanted, and someone advised him that the Kazhnitz Magid, the Rebbe of the area that he lived in, if you go to him and you get him to sign on as a buyer, other people will follow suit, and you'll get the project really off the ground. So he says, he was a misnagid, a starke misnagid. He very much didn't want to go to the Kazhnitz Magid to fundraise for the Sefer, but blessed area he's going to go. One of his neighbors, who was married for several years and was not zeichet to have children yet, asked him, I heard you going to the Kazhnitz Magid, could I give you a kvittel to bring into the Kazhnitz Magid for me? And once you're there, you kill two birds with one stone. He's like, this is really not my cup of tea, but it's a chesed for a neighbor. Fine, I'll do it. Fine. Takes a kvittel. He goes there to the Kazhnitz Magid. The Kazhnitz Magid greets him very friendly, very nice, very warm. He signs on to buy the Avnei Miluim, and everything's good. He forgets about this kvittel that he's supposed to deliver to the Kazhnitz Magid. As he's leaving Kazhnitz, he remembers that he has his neighbor's kvittel in his pocket that he's supposed to deliver. He makes an about face, he turns back, he's here for the second time. Rebbe, I'm here to give you a kvittel for so-and-so. So now he's really here like a chassid, just for a kvittel, for nothing else, to give it to the Kazhnitz Magid. Kazhnitz Magid takes the kvittel, he davens, and Reb David Padharetz goes home. Now, the story is brought down in one of the svarim of the Shemlei Rav. I don't know, I can't find it exactly where it is right now. I heard it from someone else, where the Reb David Padharetz, years later, when he would say over the story, would say, I have a tremendous amount of Akaras Atayv to the Kazhnitz Magid. Without him, the Avnei Miluim wouldn't have been published. And L'Davinenu Harav, to our great chagrin, my neighbor also had a baby. So the meaning he wasn't able to change who he was and what he believed in and whatever. But he wasn't, what's he going to say? He's not going to deny that there was success to the Kazhnitz Magid's tefillas. So I'm going to talk about kvitlach. I'm not trying to change anybody's minds over here. We're going to go through the inyan a little bit from the different sides. Now, a kvittel is actually a dual-purpose tool, because it's a tefillah, and we'll talk about the tefillah that's in a kvittel, and B, it's a vehicle for hiskashrus. And what I mean by that is, hiskashrus to tzaddikim is a very chsidish idea, that a person's success and atzlacha comes from being mekosher to a tzaddik, and that a tzaddik is an elevated stature in the world and an elevated madrega, and in its most controversial forms, like in its most extreme forms, it leads to great controversy, the theology of hiskashrus. But the basic idea of hiskashrus is something that every chassid would have with his rebbe. He's mekosher to his rebbe, he davens through his rebbe, he goes to his rebbe davens for him, and a kvittel is a vehicle of hiskashrus. Now, the one case in point that I want to discuss is there's something called the Kotzke kvittel. The Kotzke kvittel. It's published several times in Yiddish. And Kotzk is strangely known for their brevity, right? The Kotzk was always short and to the point, very sharp-witted. The Kotzke kvittel is a very long kvittel. And there's an interesting backstory to the Kotzke kvittel. The Kotzker was one of the first Polish rabbis. He took over after Rabbunim of Pshischa in 1840s, 1830s, something like that. The Kotzker was a harsh, exacting, demanding rebbe. He pushed his chassidim very, very hard. And at a certain point, the Kotzker ran out of patience for being a rebbe. To say it like that, that's the way to say it. He ran out of patience for being a rebbe, and he stopped letting people come into him. And overall, most of call it hundreds or thousands of people that considered themselves chassidim of Rabbunim and the Kotzker, whatever, were no longer allowed entry into the Kotzker. He wouldn't let anybody in. There was a few yechidim that were still allowed in, and those yechidim, went in and they were like the messengers a little bit. But over time, the Hasidus of Kotsk just like dissipated because the Kotzker wouldn't allow anyone to get anything from him. He wouldn't allow anyone to get close. Now, upon the death of the Kotzker in Be'erach 1855, I believe they were related. If not, he was just a Talmud. The Chidushei Rim, the first Ger Rebbe, becomes Rebbe. Now, the Chidushei Rim was a Talmud Chacham Muflig. He wrote Svarim in his 20s on the whole of Shas and Choshen Mishpat and parts of Shulchan Aruch. He only stopped because, he chose to. Like he was a Talmud Chacham Muflig, and he became the Rebbe for the Chassidus of Poland, the Kotzker Chassidim. Now, the Chidushei Rim had a very tragic life. He had 13 or 14, maybe 15 children, and every single one of them predeceased him. All of his children, all of his boys, I think his girls also, all of his boys predeceased him, and there was no, heir apparent to take over the Chidushei Rim when he was done being Rebbe. The Chidushei Rim was only Rebbe for 7 years. It was a short tkufa, and when he dies, there was no heir apparent. So the first Alexander Rebbe becomes the Rebbe of Polish Chassidim. And when the Chidushei Rim dies. Now, several years later, in 1870, after the Chidushei Rim is dead for several years already, his Einikel, the Sfas Emes, becomes the second Ger Rebbe. The Sfas Emes was 23 years old when he became Rebbe, very young. The Chidushei Rim also didn't die very old. The Sfas Emes became Rebbe at 23 years old, and he's the first Rebbe that has a shtickle tkufa in Ger, like a shtickle longevity, and he does not live very long. He lives till about 65, 67, but he has a 35-year tkufa as Rebbe of Ger. The Sfas Emes also has a tragic death. I think a bookcase or a table falls on him, and he gets like an injury that would refuse to heal, that ultimately gets infected, like on his foot or something, and ultimately he dies from that injury, in his 60s. Now, when the Sfas Emes is nifter, he left over a son, and that's the Chidushei Rim. Now, the Imrei Emes, the Imrei Emes. Now, the Imrei Emes goes on to be a Rebbe for like 45 years of Ger, and he's the Rebbe under who Ger becomes like Ger as we know it, like the biggest Chassidus in Poland, tens of thousands of Chassidim. Ger becomes the behemoth under the Imrei Emes. Now, the Imrei Emes was a young man taking over this Chassidus, and came to him a Chassid by the name of, his name was Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael Yuka, I think. Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael, he signs his name. His name is, Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael, Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael Karo, Mi Veletsnevik or something. Now, this is an old man who was a Chassid Nach of the Kotzker Rebbe from Kotsk, and had been a Chassid of the old Kotzker Rebbe, of the Chidushei Rim, of the Sfas Emes, and he's coming to become a Chassid of this young man, the Imrei Emes, who was 40-something years old. This is a person in his 70s or 80s, high 70s, high 80s, an old man by the time, who had been a Chassid of all the previous Rebbes, and was coming to become a Chassid of the Imrei Emes, who was a young man. And to establish the Imrei Emes as Rebbe, he gives him this kvitel called the Kotzker Kvitel. It's about 8 to 10 pages long, and it's actually a beautiful document, like documenting the hiskashrus that he had to all the Rebbes previously, to the Kotzker, to the Imrei Emes, to the Chidushei Rim, to the Sfas Emes, and he writes beautiful things about all the Rebbes that were before him. And maybe I'll read some of them. Maybe I'll share some of them. He writes beautiful things about all his things. Marshall, he writes, when he came into Kotzker the first time, he says, I walked in, and the Kotzker asked me my name. He says, Shalaisi, me'ayanatu ma shimcha. He asked me, what's your name, and where are you from? And he says, Nafal alai pachadu meira. I became totally frightful. V'yatzasi min hakelim. V'niyesi batul b'metzias. I wasn't able to talk. Pasha wasn't able to talk. I was so afraid of the Kotzker. I wasn't able to talk, he says. I didn't have anything to say. And all I was thinking, echoing in my head, is that the Kotzker is telling me the mission of Pirkei Avos. Dame ayin basul anat ha'ilach. He's not asking me my name. He doesn't care what my name is. He's telling me, what's your name and where do you come from? Like, just know what your mission is. He says, then he was zeichet to go to the Kotzker, he says, 5 times. Then eventually, he becomes a chassid of the Chidushei Rim, who he writes, murdic things about. He says, I was able to understand some of his Torahs, and what I wasn't able to understand, I can make sense of it. I would put it in my pocket. I can make sense of it even if I couldn't understand it. He says, then after the Sheva Shnois Seva, the 7 years of plenty, the Chidushei Rim was nifter, the Sfas Emes becomes the Rebbe, he says, and him, I was zeichet to go to 35 times, he says, over his whole tkufa when he was the Rebbe, maybe more. And he says, but him, what I was able to understand, and what I couldn't understand, I wasn't able to place it b'chlal. I wasn't able to even, he said things that were just lamala from my asag, I wasn't able to place it b'chlal. He says, another thing he says about the Sfas Emes is, every time I went, I realized that the time before I had nothing from him yet. The time before I was nothing, now it was more a real Chassidish letter, like a thing, and then he writes some Torahs from the Kotzker, some Torahs from the Sfas Emes, and then at the end he writes as follows. And this is an old man, a Talmud Chacham, writing to the Ramas, a young man who's going to be his Rebbe now, and he says as follows. He says, I'm asking that my name should be etched on your heart, the Kaddish V'atar, the Rebbe, that my elder years should not embarrass my younger years. My spiritual instincts, my ability to pick up Kedusha and to be attracted to Kedusha, that was my main strength as a young man. He shouldn't leave me. Here you go. This is the hiskashrus of a kvittel. It says, and being makasher myself, with a tight connection, the chazak hein beguf, hein benefesh, kasher yisi mekusher be'aviv atzadik hakadosh, v'matzadikim hakdoshim asher hayu lefanov, nishmasim began eden menucha. Al kedushasa yishlachti Yehavi, on his kedusha, meaning on the Emreamis' kedusha, I'm throwing my pekel. Ve'elav nasasi es nafshi ruchi v'nishmasi l'sakein u'lahalis nishmasi, to fix and to elevate my neshama b'makam haroila to where it needs to go. Shehi avaydasi tayrasi v'tfilasi mekosher l'avaydus hatzadik hadar hazeh. So that all my avayda, my tefillah, my Torah, and my avayda should be mekosher to the avayda of this tzaddik and this dar. B'meni avdoi hamashtacha ve'ofar anachin tachas kapas raglav Yaakov Yitzchak mechuna zelig ben chaya rachel nin v'nechad l'marna beis Yosef kai rozel mi v'ledvik. So this is a prime example of kvittel as his kashrus. Kvittel as like a way of saying, I'm yours, my neshama is yours, all my aveda goes through you. Now, this is an old man writing this to a young man. It's the idea that the Rebbe, the tzaddik of his dar, is the one that he's makasher all his feels to. Now, this idea, in its most extreme fashions, leads to theological problems. Meaning leads to like the fifth animam, and I don't know by heart. Everyone who says it by heart could say it. The fifth animam is animam b'emunah shlema shaloi levadei roi lispal dovi. Exactly. So, meaning where you cross over that line of davening to a human and things. So this has always made controversy every time kisvei hiskashrus have come into play, and it's been earlier on than Hasidim, meaning the Gurei Ari had Eksav Kashrus, the Ramchal in his circle of Talmidim had Eksav Kashrus, the Rashash in his circle of Talmidim had Eksav Kashrus, Hasidim had Eksav Kashrus, meaning every time this Eksav Kashrus comes into play, it leads to sometimes these type of accusations, and you have to know exactly where to draw the line. But that's not the part that I want to go into today, really. That's just one of the elements of a kvittel. The second element of a kvittel that I want to go into is the element of tefillah, which is essentially a very basic thing for some it's Tzrichim Raya, but we'll go through some of the basic Gemaras, Chazals, the Mahalach of it. Now, kvittel is a way for a chassid to come to his Rebbe and ask his Rebbe to daven for him. You write down on the paper the name, Bas the mother, and the Rebbe will say a tefillah for the chassid. Now, the chiddush of it, I guess, would be is that be'atzem, you go to a person to ask him to daven for you. So the normal way would be you sit down by a person, a Talmud Chacham, a tzaddik, whatever it is, and you say, I have this and this problem, I need this and this Yeshua, could you daven for me? Fine. A kvittel seems like a shortcut a little bit. You write a name on a paper, you give it to the tzaddik, and without even telling him what or why you're here, or what the context of your tefillah needs are, the tzaddik is able to daven for you. Now, in the Chassidish Welt, there's a few different mahalchim that are said about this. In some Chassidish Sfarim, it's brought down that the Baal Shem Tov taught the Rebbes, and the Rebbes taught other Rebbes, and got passed down the ability to look at a kvittel, see the name, and be able to see what exactly this person needs. And Memela, the Rebbe would be able to just look at the kvittel and daven for whatever the person needs with that tefillah. Now, that's a version that says that kvittel is like a lechatchila method of tefillah, right? Meaning that you give a kvittel to the Rebbe, that's lechatchila. The Rebbe will be able to see what you need, and he'll daven for you for whatever it is that you need. Other svarim, like there's a sefer from the Chartkiva, one of the original Rebbes, bring down a story, a strange story. Bring down a story that the Baal Shem Tov was a very sensitive person, and anyone that was close to him was very close to him, and he remembered them, and he knew every parat of their life and every detail of their life, and he took great interest in their life. And when a person who was close to Baal Shem Tov would come for him to daven, it would leave a lasting impression. Baal Shem Tov would feel his tsar for a long time, and he would daven for him, for many weeks or days or years, whatever it took to this person needed. When the Baal Shem Tov was nifter, and the Mezurcha Magid took over, so Mezurcha Magid, people were coming for him to daven, and Mezurcha Magid was like, it's in one ear out the other. They tell me the name. An hour later, I forgot the name. I don't remember anymore what I'm davening for. it's not. What am I doing here? So he went to the kever, the Baal Shem Tov, and he asked his Rebbe, what am I supposed to do? I don't really know if I'm davening for them. I don't remember them. I don't what am I doing over here? And supposedly the Baal Shem Tov came to him in a dream, and he told him that have them write it down for you on a paper, like that. Even if you can't remember for a long time, but a paper lasts. You'll have the paper. You look at the paper again every day. You look through your stack of KVITEL, and it'll remind you. It will jog your memory as to who you're davening for, why you're davening for them. So according to this version that's set over from the chart, a KVITEL is a suboptimal mahalach of davening, of a tzaddik davening for you. That's him. You want a tzaddik who remembers you, who knows you, who cares about you, someone you have a relationship with, so to speak. But less breira if the tzaddik is too much on his plate and he's not going to be able to remember you. So write it down on a paper so Chach the tzaddik could see your name and he'll remember what he's davening for and it will jog his memory and he'll daven for you. So meaning there's two versions even in Chassidish Sfarim. If a KVITEL is like the optimal mahalach of prayer for a tzaddik, or it's the suboptimal mahalach of prayer where a tzaddik is pashut remembering you like that. Now, b'cholef and shiyah, optimal or suboptimal, let's just go through some of the basic ideas of a tzaddik davening for you. So now this might come as a surprise to some people. The din that you're supposed to go to a tzaddik to mivakesh rachamim when something's going wrong and you need Yeshua is actually brought down in Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah in Hilchos Bikur Cholim in Siman Shin Lamed Hey in Hilchos Bikur Cholim, the Ramah says as follows: Haga the Yeshayimrim, he says there is a deya shemishi yesh lechayla bebeisai, someone who has someone who's ill in his household. Yelachetz chacham shebeir, he should go to the chacham in his city. Sheyivakesh lavrachamim, that the chacham should daven for him. So the Ramah brings down a Yeshayimrim. There's a deya that says that a person or someone who's sick in his household, they should go to a tzaddik, or the Ramah says a chacham, let's pay attention to that word, it will make a difference, tell a chacham to daven for him so that he could have Yeshua. Now, what the Ramah is quoting is really Meforsh Gemara Baba Basra. The Gemara Baba Basra, and the Kuf Tazayin Amud Aleph, the Gemara says as follows: Darish Rav Pinchas Bar Chama. Rav Pinchas Bar Chama darshan, Kol sheyesh leichayla b'teich beisai, anybody who has someone who's ill b'teich beisai, yelachetz al chacham, he should go to a chacham, v'yevakish alav rachamim, and the chacham should daven for him, shenemar, chamas hamelech malchei maves, v'ish chacham yichaprena. So a chacham is able to be mechaper the anger of the king and daven for this person who's sick in your household. So the kasha that's asked is, why does Ramah say Yesh Emrim? It's in Forshah Gemara. Every time you have a mandamer in the Gemara, Darish or Pinchas, you don't have a chaylik in the Gemara. Meaning you have Darish or Pinchas. That's not Yesh Emrim. Yesh Emrim when there's a machlekes. There's 2 days. How to learn. Shalos how do you paskin? Yesh Emrim. What's the 2 days? It's Rav Pinchas is saying a Gemara for Rashis and Baba Basra. So if you look in the Rishonim in the Gemara Baba Basra bring is this machlekes as follows. The Ran in the Gemara Baba Basra brings a fascinating thing. It's an Amuk Yosef or a Ran. It might be an Amuk Yosef. I'm sorry, it might be an Amuk Yosef. The Amuk Yosef says the minig zeh b'tzarfas. There's a minig in Sarfas called sheyesh leichayla. Anybody who has a chayla, bevakesh pnei harav atayfis yeshiva, goes to the Rav who has a yeshiva, the Rosh Yeshiva of the neighborhood, sheyivarach chaysei, that he should give him a bracha. Now, there's a few nekudis that the Amuk Yosef is updating over here. The Amuk Yosef A says yelechir tzachacham atayfis yeshiva, the Rosh Yeshiva of the town. And secondly, the Amuk Yosef also makes this transition from V'yivakish of Rachamim to Bracha. The Amuk Yosef says you should give him a Bracha. Meaning, in the Gemara it says Yivakish of Rachamim, we should daven for you. In the Amuk Yosef it says Bracha, he should give you a Bracha. Now, so the Amuk Yosef seems to be learning the Gemara K'pshutai, that if someone has someone sick in his house, you go to the Chacham of the area, and he'll daven for you, or he'll give you a Bracha, and you'll have some sort of Yeshua. Now the Meiri, if you look on the Babasa, the Meiri teaches the Gemara differently. The Meiri says, he has an ill person in his house, and you're a low-level guy. You don't really know how to daven so well. You don't know what to daven for, how to daven. And he'll teach you how to daven. He'll tell you what to daven for, how to daven, what's the KVITEL to say. I mean, just like a kolkari comes out in the beginning of the which KVITEL should be said, and what we say for this, what we say for that. Tchinas or Barkashas, go to the Chacham, and he'll tell you what to daven for. So according to the Meiri, you're not asking the Chacham to daven for you. You're asking the Chacham to teach you how to daven. So the Ramah, when he says Yesh Emrim, is saying it's a machlekes, the Amuk Yosef and the Meiri had to learn the Gemara. But Yesh Emrim, according to the Amuk Yosef's version of how to learn the Gemara, and that was the minig in Sarfas. That was the minig in France when the Amuk Yosef was writing a long time ago. Now, Rav Zalman used to say over, Rav Zalman Orbach used to say over, B'Shem Rav Asher Lemel something, I forgot his last name, Rav Asher Lemel, who was a Rav in Europe before the war. He was a Rav in Lublin. Rav Elio Kletzkin, that was his name. Rav Elio Kletzkin is a Rav in Lublin before the war. Rav Zalman used to say over that, why does it say Yelech Etzel Chacham? It should say Yelech Etzel Tzadik. Go to a Tzadik, V'yivak L'Shav Racham, who daven for you. Why does it say Yelech Etzel Chacham? So the Rav Zalman used to say, b'shem this Rav, it has to be avad, it has to be a tzaddik. Someone who's a tzaddik, he's not just a wise man. Just a wise man is not going to do anything. You need a guy who's a tzaddik. But it has to be a guy who's genuga chacham, that when he gets results, he's not going to be tailed b'schos atzmai. You go to a tzaddik who's also a chacham and knows not to take credit for everything. He's going to say, oh yeah, Baruch Hashem, you had Yeshua, Hashem took care of you. I mean, that's what Shlomo used to say over the Yelech Chacham part. Now, Chazal in all over Shas, there's many stories of this idea of Darash Pinchas being put into action. The Gemara in Brachas and the Flamadal and Beis, it's a famous Gemara, but I'll just say it over quickly. The Gemara says as follows: Tanar Rabbanan Maisa Shechala b'Noisher of Gamliel. Rav Gamliel's son was ill. Shagar Shnei Talmidei Chametz Rav Chanina ben Dosa levakish levrachamim. He sent two Talmidim Chacham to go to Rav Chanina ben Dosa to invakish levrachamim. Kivin Shiroi, when he saw the Talmidim coming and he knew who they were, he understood the picture already. Meaning this was a tzaddik who had a connection to Rav Gamliel and knew the background, knew the story, knew what was going on. Allah La'aliyah, he went into the attic. Ubikish levrachamim. He davened. When he came down, Amalam, he told him, L'chu, Amalahem, L'chu shechaltzasei chama. He's taken care of. Amrulei v'chi naviata, Amalam loy navi anochi, v'loy ben navi anochi. I'm not a navi or the son of a navi. Elakach mekublani. This is what is mekabel. Im shgura tvilasi b'fi. If my tefillah flows off my mouth, my lips smoothly, yodei ani shu mekubel. I know it was a tefillah that's accepted. V'im lav, yodei ani shu meturif. I know that it didn't work out right. So Yashvu v'kasvu, they sat down and they wrote Kivnu Oisasha. They wrote down exactly what time this conversation took place. When they got to Rav Gamliel, Amalahem, he told them, you weren't Moisef minute, you weren't Megareya minute, Taka. That minute is when the refuah took place. So Rav Chanina ben Dosa, with his tefillas, was able to repile this thing. V'shal, fine. Shuv Ma'aseh Rav Chanina ben Dosa was another story of Rav Chanina ben Dosa. He went to learn by his Rebbe, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. V'chala b'noi shel Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's son got sick. Amalei, he told him, Chanina b'ni, my son Chanina, bakish levrachim, daven for him, v'yichye, he should live. Hiniach Roshi ben Birkov, he put his head between his knees, ubikish levrachim, v'chaya, and he lived. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, fine, if I would have done this all day, kulei loyim ashgichan alav, they wouldn't have paid attention to me. Amar le'yeshtei, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's wife is a little bit troubled with it. She says, V'chi Chanina gedolim imcha, is Chanina your Talmud bigger than you? Amar lo, lav, elahu daim ke'eved l'fnei hamelech, anim daim ke'sar l'fnei hamelech. He's like an Eved in front of the king, and I'm a Sar in front of the king. So a Sar can't just barge in at any minute and ask for something, an Eved can come in and ask for something. But upon him, you have Rav Chanina ben Dosa davening for someone who's ill and getting results. Likewise, the Gemara in Tainus brings many stories in regarding to rain with Abba Chilkiah and Chani Amagil, who Chazal would come to them to daven for results. There was a tzara that Klal Yisrael was facing. Chazal would come to them to daven for results. So upon him, this idea that Darash of Pinchas, that Yelech Chacham Vivakish Racham, that the Ramah is paskening, is brought out many times in Chazal, and something that's very well sourced, very well well established. Now, to address the nakuda of Kili, you're asking an emtzah, you're asking an intermediary to daven, you're only supposed to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So interestingly enough, the Chasam Sofer in Arachayim in Shuvah Kuf Samach Vav, Chasam Sofer explains as follows. He says, since Klal Yisrael is all Arevim, Klal Yisrael is one guf. We're all part of the same thing, he says. So if you have a choice, should the head go daven or should the toe go daven to present themselves in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? He says it's just likely you'll get better results if the head goes and represents in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu instead of the toe. So he says when a tzaddik, a chacham, Rosh Hashiva, a rebbe goes and davens for someone who's ill, he's representative of the head of Klal Yisrael. You're the toe of Klal Yisrael, or maybe the fungus on the toe of Klal Yisrael. So you just have a better shot if the head goes and presents itself than if the toe does. Now, this is all the basic idea that a tzaddik or a Talmid Chacham or a Shiva or a Rebbe could daven for someone, which is represented in a KVITEL. Now, the $1 million question is, and this is a very relevant part of it, is where did money get involved? A KVITEL involves usually a pidyon. Usually a second part of the KVITEL is to give a pidyon to the Rebbe. Where did a pidyon become a part of the KVITEL? So, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach again, who stammed from Hasidim actually, he was a anikel of the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov. Now, interestingly, the Chibina Rav used to say that Toldos was first a Litvak and then became a Chassid later in his life. So the Chibina used to say to Shlomo Zalman, you're an anikel from when he was still a Litvak. Like, you're not an anikel from when he was a Chassid, just don't see that over here, you're an anikel from when he was still a Litvak. But Shlomo Zalman was an anikel of the Toldos and grew up with, Chassidish ideas, certainly. And he used to say as follows, that the reason why, he says, he used to complain. He says, people come to me to ask me to daven for them. And like, it's almost like a chutzpah, he says, I don't know the guy. A guy walks into my house, I never met him before in my life, and he tells me, Rebbe, I need this, I need that. I'm going to go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's like a joke. I'm like coming to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's like, this guy that I don't know came for something that I don't know about and is asking me to daven, so like maybe take care of it for him. It's like, how do I even, something came upon him? Like, Shem Zalman used to say that you're not allowed to say it in Rafa'inu. Rafa'inu is for personal things. You can't pretend it's like everything's personal now. Like, it's almost a chutzpah, he says, to come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's why the early Rebbe says, Aval Hasidim, he says, they gave money to a pigeon to the Rebbe, so now the Rebbe has some self-interest. Now the Rebbe is allowed to come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, listen, I took money for this. I can't, like, you can leave me here high and dry. I was paid to do this. I can't, it's a job. HaKadosh Baruch Hu help me with my parnasa. This is what Shem Zalman says over, that the Rebbe's used to take money. Now, it's not just a joke that Shem Zalman used to say. It's actually the Tzvi Hersh Rimonov, the Remendel Rimonov, his son, used to say this, that the reason why he takes money is because Haytachan, that I could promise you a result, that I could say I'm going to go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm going to get something for you. I can't get anything for you. If you pay me, Sachach, I was paid to do something. I come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and I could say I was paid. Don't leave me empty-handed. Now, the Tzvi Hersh Rimonov was actually known to take exorbitant sums of money for kvittel. He was a very expensive kvittel, and this is all brought down Chassidus Ram. This is nothing that I'm making up. He took a lot of money for kvittel, and some of his fellow Rebbes, compatriots, had tinus on him. Like, it's too much. You take a pigeon for your parnasa, hear something a little bit, but like take an exorbitant sum of money for kvittel, it's too much. And he used to say this, that this is the only way that I could say that I'm going to get a result, is if I put myself on the line, I took money. And supposedly when the Yismach Moshe heard this over from Tzvi Hersh Rimonov, he said, okay, fine, Nichamtani. Like, I was always upset that he took so much money for a kvittel, but now I understand that he needs the money to be able to guarantee results. Now, interestingly, there are Rebbes who are very anti-taking money for kvittelach, and I guess just to close the loop over here, the Ger Rebbes, starting from the Imrei Emes, starting from the Chedush Harim, never took money for kvittelach, and they all had businesses. The Imrei Emes, I can find a few in a second. The ones now, I think everybody knows what the business is. Today, the Ger Rebbes are very wealthy. But here, today the Ger Rebbe is very wealthy. The current Ger Rebbe is a big real estate owner. His father was a big real estate owner. Today they're very wealthy. They have no need for a chassid's kvittel. But even going all the way back, the Chedush Harim was before the Chedush Harim became the Ger Rebbe. He was the Rav of Ger, which was a small village outside Varsha, Gura Kaliva, and he had a salary as being a Rav. When he became a Rebbe, he retired as Rav. He said he can't be a Rav and a Rebbe together, and he needed a salary, and his wife had a store where she sold tobacco products. And at that time his business was very, very schwach, and he was very poor. He was not a rich Rebbe at all. Now I'm sorry, I messed that up, I'm sorry. The Chedush Harim got a salary as Rav. The Sfas Emes, when he took over, did not feel capable of being Rav and Rebbe at the same time and owned a tobacco store with his wife, and that's how he made his parnasa. Now his kids, the Imrei Emes, had a shutvis in a Svarim store. He was a partner in a Svarim store. He made a parnasa from that. The Beis Yisrael, the next Ger Rebbe, was a shutif in Poland in a fish store. And the Lev Simcha was in Poland before he became a real estate person in Poland. Before that, sold wine for a living. In Eretz Yisrael, he bought real estate and etc. So the Ger Rebbe is going all the way back before they were actually wealthy, even when they were poor, were very against taking money for a kvittel. This is a little bit of the things regarding to kvittel. Have a good day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.